Ever since the first FNAF Freddy's game, people have made so many theories on the lore and characters, but most are debunked by this point. With more games and spin-offs, books, and now movies, FNAF Freddy's theories and timelines look a lot different now, and a lot of theories in the early FNAF Freddy's days have aged bad. But what about the theories that actually aged well? This is part 3 of the series where I cover early FNAF theories that aged well, but don't worry, you don't have to watch the videos in order. Not every theory on this list is confirmed, but are ones I think have cool details that aged well and came out at a time where people weren't completely sure of how accurate they were. There are also a few on this list that I think have small details that aged well, even if most of it was pretty inaccurate. I hope you're having a good day. If not, I hope it does get better. If you're new here, welcome, and thank you for tuning into the channel. The Animatronics think you're a killer. In the very first game theory video, MatPat would theorize that we were playing as the killer who was responsible for the missing children's incident. And there would be many theories afterwards that would add or change details, but all revolved around the idea that the reason the animatronics were trying to attack you in the games was because they recognized you and were trying to get revenge. Now, while later theories revealed that we played as Michael Afton in the first game under the name Mike Schmidt and not William Afton, who was responsible for the murders, there would later be a cutscene in Sister Location where Michael said, "They thought I was you," possibly referring to when he visited the FNAF 1 location, and implies they did actually think he was the killer and could have been hostile towards him because of that. Between then, it was a bit complicated lore-wise, especially with the whole Mike Trap and Will Trap theory debate, but this monologue in Sister Location would basically serve as an explanation for Michael being there and being attacked while at the same time not being the killer. Now, while the placement of Sister Location on the FNAF timeline is still debated here and there occasionally, assuming it takes place after FNAF 1, this would make perfect sense and would make the original reasoning for why the animatronics attack you age pretty well. And interestingly, further points similarities between Michael Afton and William Afton, who are both represented by a purple guy sprite. Inconsistencies like this can sometimes be annoying to theorize with, and even more annoying to try to understand as a viewer or reader. It could be reasonably argued that the lore of FNAF, especially early on in the first 4 games or so, changed a lot with some retcons, and this could explain the sprite inconsistencies and other issues with the lore. But for the sake of these videos, I'm just going to ignore that because that's boring and isn't as interesting to me, especially because apparently Scott's one retcon isn't confirmed or anything. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it was just a troll. Instead, I think inconsistencies like this could just be plot holes, which, while not a satisfying explanation, does make the most sense to me, especially with how FNAF Freddy's communicates its story, because of like its weird delivery of the lore and everything and the hidden stories or whatever. I think just a lot got lost in translation or was just really rushed or made up last minute. At the same time, it does seem like with every game, even from what I've heard about of The Secret of the Mimic, they are constantly recontextualizing everything in prior games. Honestly, I haven't kept up with FNAF after Steel Wool took over. I tend to just stick with the games and lores from before then because I find it more interesting. But let me know in the comments if the lore in future games is something you want to see as well. Anyways, I do like this theory a lot, especially with what we know from Sister Location. I feel like it gives Michael more to do, and at the same time preserves William Afton as this mysterious figure whose actions are felt by the surrounding characters. It wouldn't feel right being able to play as William Afton, even though we might have in that one minigame, and I really enjoy hearing the lines from Michael's voice actor, so to give them this much weight in theorizing is really cool. Also, under the interpretation that Michael is a more morally good character who's trying to fix the wrongs made by his father, I felt so crushed of Michael's delivery of the line, "They thought I was you," because a trope I really like is a son trying not to become his father due to the trauma of their upbringing. This comparison being made, especially by the victims of his father, would probably cut really deep. Even if Michael is a morally gray figure, it's clear by the end of the scene he is now going after his father, and this is some of my favorite writing in FNAF. Speaking of Michael potentially not being all that good, Mike Accomplice. Okay, so I did actually include this theory in a different video where I covered theories that aged bad, but I had finished making that original video before the FNAF 2 movie came out by like 5 days or something, so I just indirectly got mad patted all these years later, which honestly I'm not even mad about. Michael Afton's reveal in the movie was crazy to see in the theaters. I almost put the 2 killers theory on this list too, but I'll save that for later because we don't really know how involved movie Michael Afton was in the murders committed by William Afton. For context, probably due to the magenta and purple sprite in the FNAF minigames, and also under certain interpretations of Sister Location, there were theories about Michael Afton having helped his father in his murders from the missing children's incident and other crimes. The extent of this ranges from certain interpretations of the 2 killers theory, where Michael could have also committed the murders, to just Michael doing his father's bidding in order to help him, but I had just at the time thought that he was more so searching for answers and going along with his father just for that. Personal biases aside, it's revealed that in the movie, Michael Afton is, yeah, not a great guy, which regardless of audience reaction, proves this early theory right in the continuity of the movies. It also makes another theory age well, being that Mike Schmidt and Michael Afton are different characters, but in the games it's much more likely they are the same, using evidence from the logbook, FNAF 4, and Michael being referred to as Mike in Sister Location. Anyways, despite being wrong and despite the mixed reaction to this, to say the least, I actually kind of like this. Flawed characters, I think, are more interesting to watch. There's that common thing about villain characters or morally gray characters being more fun to write and can be more compelling to audiences than characters who are fully good. Examples like this are Zuko from Avatar and Jinx from Arcane. And I don't think this is always the case, but at least from personal writing experience, I think it's just because it can sometimes be challenging to write flaws into hero characters, whereas in characters who are under less strict writing limitations, writers can have more options when exploring character motivations and flaws. Broad generalizations aside, I think specifically for the movie timeline, this could work pretty well. I'm curious to see where they take the character from there, but yeah, in retrospect, it kind of feels forced, at least to me. But in future movies, now that the character is established, I would like to see him go through some sort of arc where he might be an antagonist, but faces off against his father. All I know is a Sister Location movie would go crazy. This is definitely just me being excited for future movies, but I just see so much potential with all the set pieces they set up in FNAF 2. What it also does is briefly touch on the theories of how William Afton cares about his kids. When discussing the will care theory, I've seen speculation of people saying that he really only sees them as tools or extensions of himself, and I think it's pretty cool to have Vanessa break away from this where Michael fully embraces it, either to seek approval from his father, or just because he enjoys murdering people. He does seem a little too happy when the crew at the beginning of the movie were slowly getting picked off. Like, he's definitely his father's son here. The movies at this point are very different from the games, and it's cool to see a surprising amount of early theories getting referenced, even if indirectly. Bite Nightmares and FNAF 4. Under a FNAF 4 teaser mega thread on the Finance of Freddy subreddit, user Clark Meister would comment, quote, "Wait, the human body can survive without the frontal lobe. The bite of 87. Nightmare. If you were a person who was attacked by a rogue robotic entity and left permanently brain damage from, what would your nightmares be about?" End quote. Before I talk about why this is interesting, I need to mention why this wouldn't be too accurate for a couple of reasons. The biggest being that the bite that would be revealed when FNAF 4 came out was the bite of 1983. But small stuff like that aside, Game Theory would also post a video about how people who do have their frontal lobe damaged wouldn't have nightmares due to the functions of the frontal lobe, which I found pretty interesting, and I wanted to mention it briefly. That was like one of the only times Game Theory made like a more scientific based video about Finance of Freddy's, and it was a cool video to watch, just in the middle of all their theories and stuff about FNAF. Speaking of Game Theory, this is also when they were planning to make a FNAF 4 video, but the game had came out as a surprise a bit earlier than what everyone had thought, and had messed with their upload schedule. In the video they did release afterwards, FNAF 4 got it all wrong. They would also cover how the teasers and source code of Scott's website repeated the numbers 87, referencing the bite, and the word nightmare over the teaser images themselves. I'm basically mentioning this to say that there was definitely more than one person predicting that the nightmare animatronics weren't real. Anyways, there would later be theories after FNAF 4 came out about how the nightmare animatronics in the games aren't real, and instead manifestations of trauma depending on who we play as. This theory specifically implies the bite victim has these nightmares, which there were many theorists agreeing with after FNAF 4's release, but a more modern interpretation is Mike Dreamer, which the only similarity to the original post is the implications that the animatronics aren't real, but is still due to witnessing the actual event, which, with Michael being the brother who wears the Foxy mask and causes a crying child to get his head crushed by Fredbear, would definitely leave an impact. Besides the actual bite, Mike Dreamer is a theory that says that we play as Michael Afton during the nights of FNAF 4, which are basically his nightmares, and this could take place during his childhood or possibly during the events of FNAF 1 due to how the nightmare animatronics parallel the FNAF 1 animatronics. This part seems a bit less clear, but the stronger part of this is the reason a lot of people believe it's Mike that we play as, being due to the evidence in the security logbook, where Mike draws Nightmare Fredbear. Mike drawing that would just be a bit hard to do if he hadn't experienced the nightmares, especially if they weren't real. I'm not a huge fan of dream theories, especially when looking at FNAF games from a story lens. Yeah, it would give a good reason for the really cool Nightmare animatronic designs, but FNAF has found creative ways in-universe to create these animatronics, so I would have just preferred that. Still, it's really cool how even before FNAF 4 was released, early concepts like this were being discussed and still are with evidence from the books. Dawko movie predictions. This one will be a bit quick because it's just some movie predictions, but I wanted to include on the list because of the insane amount of time the FNAF movie would be talked about before it came out. Back in 2015, around the time that the FNAF movie was first announced, Dawko, along with Razbowski, would talk about their predictions for the movie. And while not everything was right, like they doubted that the movie would center around the night guard job itself, and instead focus more on showing the killings, there are a couple things that did age well. For starters, they said that there would probably be a scene showing the night guard getting hunted out by the animatronics, even if it was only a quick reference. And while Mike Schmidt did serve as the protagonist of the movie did start with the night guard getting killed by the animatronics. They also talked about how they would probably change the design of the puppet to make it scarier, and this applies to the second movie, where the puppet itself didn't change, but it did have some unique designs when it possessed people. I have no idea why it looks like that. The puppet ends up possessing Lisa, one of the ghost hunters, Abby, and later Vanessa. The Abby possession kind of jump scared me, I'm not gonna lie, so I guess the scarier approach worked. Dawko and Razbowski also wanted it to look a bit more human, which while the actual puppet isn't, the human puppets are about as human as you can get. Nightmare animatronics are different. In the FNAF Theory podcast uploaded on Dawko's channel in 2015, they covered a post where someone was talking about Nightmare Chica being the same animatronic as the other Chicas. And a detail Dawko, Razbowski, and BitGaming25 used to debunk this directly from the post was about Chica's nostrils, but in the video they also mentioned that Chica's head shape was a little bit different across the animatronics. They discussed this topic further, saying that animatronics are likely their own separate thing, which ended up being right, but they'd also talk about the similarities between the Wizards and the classics, which is still a topic still theorized about today. I wanted to include this on those lists just because of someone using Chica's nostrils as evidence. The post was basically making a counter argument against the detail of the Nightmare animatronic Chica being the only one with nostrils, and that's really funny to me because while it seems a bit silly now, a lot of early theorizing would talk about very small design details like this and use it as evidence in terms of the broader lore. Another example I can think of is Freddy having bit a kid because of what people said was a handprint on its face. Bonnie is blue. This is probably the most controversial theory on this list, and after years and years of waiting, there's actual confirmation from Scott about this very important lore discussion. Before we get to that though, you know the whole glitch about people not being subscribed? Yeah, apparently that was real, so if you're interested in seeing more videos like this, check to see if you're subscribed, or if you're new here, consider subscribing to join our community here. Anyways, the topic of Bonnie being purple or blue has been a very heated debate since FNAF 1, with some people even bringing up the merch that was released. It was unresolved for a while with no comment from Scott, until the production of the FNAF movie came around and lead designer Robert Bennett was designing Bonnie, and had actually thought that the character was purple too. Apparently, Scott had noticed this and jumped in, saying he had been blue the whole time, and it was just lighting that made him look purple. I don't know why he didn't bother to mention this sooner. I mean, the merch does look pretty purple, even in artworks too, but apparently that was all just because of lighting. Watch this actually be Scott's one retcon. I don't know anymore. So for everyone who was on the side of Bonnie being blue, yeah, I guess you were right. But I still think that the dress is white and gold. Mike is the crying child's brother. In a series of theories posted on Tumblr and Steam in 2015 and 2016, there'd be a couple theories on Mike Schmidt being the crying child's older brother, being the boy that wore the Foxy mask. And since they're pretty similar, I'll talk about them both here. First, I'll read the Tumblr post made in July 25th, 2015, made by user @FNAF Get Your Facts Right. Quote, in FNAF 4, the older brother could have become Mike Schmidt. This is backed up by both the fact that he would know about the original animatronics and the restaurant and has history with it. Also, the crying child and It's Me could easily come from the child being that of Golden Freddy, hence why Golden Freddy and It's Me is so active on FNAF 1 and not on the other games as much. And it also explains why It's Me is in front of Pirate's Cove too, since he wore the Foxy head so much. This goes hand in hand with the child being Golden Freddy. I don't need to say why, just saying that the evidence should come straight to mind if you've seen the FNAF 4 game. End quote. This wasn't the only theory using this evidence, as this would be a detail that's used later on in many other theories and timelines. It's actually kind of heartbreaking, at least to me. The crying child is literally calling out to his brother who was responsible for his death, And there are a couple ways to interpret this, but however you see this, it makes for a really cool detail and lore bit that only works if you know they're siblings. This is just speculation on my part, but just using the knowledge that FNAF 3 was meant to be the original ending, or even FNAF 1 apparently being meant to be Scott's last game, I'm assuming that the original intent of the "It's Me" sign is just letting the night guard know that there's dead children inside the animatronic, and remove any doubt that it's just the animatronics acting quirky. That's really just a guess though, but to see this detail being used that way later on in the series is pretty cool regardless. I'm not sure how intentional the Foxy mask part was, but to give Mike more of a reason to be wearing that makes the "It's Me" sign a bit cooler. I mentioned this before, but despite the reaching, the lore in Five Nights at Freddy's can have some really interesting writing like this, whether intentional or not. But because you have to know the details and cross-reference the games and probably look up theories online, it'd be a bit harder to appreciate. The theories could all just be wrong though, so what do I know? The other post that theorized that Mike Schmidt is a crying child's brother was made by Hunter number 357 on Steam. They mentioned that this is a theory they saw elsewhere, but changed it up a bit. I'll just read it out here because it's super detailed and pretty interesting, though it's worth mentioning it's not totally original. Quote, after his brother got bitten, Mike went through therapy in a hospital as he was ever so slightly insane because he just killed his own brother, and he thinks it's his fault. He is sent to a hospital where he has nightmares about the animatronics and his brother. Meanwhile, Jeremy goes and gets a job at the new Fazbear's Pizza. There was an old one as a sister location to Fredbear's, so that he can discover more about the mysterious place. He learns about the killer robots firsthand and calls in Fritz, who also wanted to find out about the secrets of Fazbear's, to take his shift one night. Jeremy tells Fritz about the animatronics acting up, so Fritz tries to fix him in custom night, getting them both fired. Later, another smaller Fazbear's Pizza opens. Mike has been branded as rehabilitated and is persuaded by his friends to get a job there, as the company banned the other two from the grounds after what happened at the last pizzeria, so he goes there. Having hallucinations, "It's me" everywhere, either because he imagines his brother being there, or he's fessing up to the bite. Anyways, he sneaks Fritz in, who messes with the animatronics again, and gets Mike fired. 30 years later, the friends had the idea to make an amusement park attraction based around Fazbear's. They managed to make an entire attraction, and even get hold of an old spring Bonnie. They put Mike in charge of the night shift again, but he's forgotten almost completely about his brother at this point. Jeremy is the voice on the phone in FNAF 3 too. According to an old theory, the Freddy mask guy died, but I'm not so sure. I think that he's older than the others and has been working at Fazbear's for a while as the security guard and an actor. Yep, he's none other than the phone guy. He got separated from his friends after the bite as he didn't want to remind himself of the horrors of that day. He really liked Foxy, although Mike liked him even more, so he got the mask to the party. He records all the tapes for Fredbear's and is the guy in the Fredbear costume that's in the Night 3 minigame in FNAF 4. He worked at FNAF 2's pizzeria before Jeremy and Fritz, and sends messages to them every night. He then works again at FNAF 1's pizzeria and records messages on his week there, where he ends up dying. Anyways, that's the theory, edited massively but keeping the same point relevant, which is Mike, Jeremy, Fritz, and Phone Guy were the bullies in FNAF 4. I think, anyways. End quote. Theories like this are some of my favorite to read because they go beyond just talking about the evidence and use it as a base for an actual story, although I'm definitely a bit biased. Like, yeah, don't get me wrong, details are inaccurate. It's still debated on who the bullies actually are, excluding Mike, and from what I've seen, everyone has their own interpretations. But I like the creativity of the storytelling FNAF theories like this. Anyways, about the actual theory, I like how it uses the characters that are established in a neat way, and giving them all an actual reason to be there. One of the only things that age well, at least in terms of future theory crafting, is Mike being the crying child's brother, but this theory attempts to give motivations to each of the characters' inclusion, and also gives more significance to the bullies in FNAF 4, which is a breath of fresh air. I feel like in FNAF, and honestly a lot of other media, when it comes to sequels or continuations, new characters are really just there for the environment more so than any real story beat. Making the bullies more fleshed out by making them the other established characters, I think is a really cool way to build on the lore. Puppet is in Golden Freddy. So in a video posted in 2015 by Pretty Grumpy Bear, she covered a theory about the marionette being inside Golden Freddy. In terms of the actual theory itself, it was based off speculation using the animatronic cutscenes in FNAF 2, where Chica and Bonnie would stare at you, then eventually Golden Freddy would look at you, and then finally the puppet. In the theory itself, she shared the claim that the Fazbear Entertainment decided to destroy the animatronics at a previous location, and that the puppet had hid inside Golden Freddy in order to escape being scrapped. When Golden Freddy arrived at the new location, the puppet would be inside. She included the evidence of the eyes being similar, and in the cutscene itself, pointing out how Golden Freddy would stand in the same place that the puppet would, implying that the puppet wore it briefly and took it off. Okay, so obviously not a lot aged well, and this is a huge stretch, but as a comment under the video pointed out, this kind of predicted the main mechanic behind the Lefty animatronic in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. In blueprints discovered in the game, the mechanics behind Lefty were shown and also revealed that the meaning behind the animatronic's name being to, quote, lure, encapsulate, fuse, transport, and extract, end quote. Also in the blueprints, the mention of the suit ceiling was used in the theories to put together that Lefty was used to capture the puppet animatronic in the game and keep it subdued with occasional electronic shocks and a lullaby, which the lullaby is also used for the puppet in FNAF 2 through the music box. I'm gonna generalize a bit because it starts to get a little complicated in the actual specifics, but basically in the game, Henry Emily was thought to have created Lefty and used it in order to capture the puppet possessed by Charlotte Emily, his daughter, locking the puppet inside of Lefty. I think it's cool that this pretty old theory aged well in terms of the puppet being inside of the animatronic, even if it's just one small detail. But like this next theory on this list, it's a bit surprising of how many of these coincidences exist in FNAF. Golden Freddy is a hallucination. This is another one that's more so just a random theory that aged well in a weird way, being actually including hallucinations in FNAF 3. There's sometimes still theories about this, but Golden Freddy was thought to be a hallucination the Night Guard would experience, as opposed to an actual physical animatronic. I guess there could also be arguments for the shadow animatronics, but I want to talk about Golden Freddy specifically. In FNAF 3, we do actually get hallucination animatronics in the form of the Phantoms. Whether they are real or not was still debated even long after FNAF 3 came out, but in universe, it's implied that they aren't real. Though whether or not that has anything to do with Springtrap or just a lack of oxygen was debated by theorists, and a lot of speculation exists. Golden Freddy was always such an interesting animatronic to me. It's pretty clear that there is something different about this one even in FNAF 2, and compared to the others in the later games, something that's cool is that when he shows up in FNAF 1, he would crash your game as opposed to just taking you to the game over screen. So there's this paranormal emphasis on the character. Yeah, it makes sense for the character to actually be real, but I really like how Golden Freddy's abilities are undefined, and I would have liked to see an interpretation where it's more of a ghost or spirit than anything physical. Which I guess you can make the argument, it just wouldn't make sense to me based on how the other possessed animatronics operate. Also, to see this game sort of imply that the Phantom animatronics aren't real, or like the name suggests, might be ghosts, is pretty cool. I like it when FNAF takes advantage of this part of the horror in the games, and it can also make for some pretty cool designs, even when some of them look like a watermelon. At this point, I've come across a lot of theories like this that age well in a specific context when it comes to ideas on what the animatronics actually are. I wouldn't go as far to say that Scott took inspiration from the community all the time. It's just really cool that the earlier theories and ideas about what the animatronics could be would later end up being implemented in some way later on. I wanted to mention this on this list, and I think it falls under the vague term of aging well, even if Golden Freddy himself is real. A lot of Mike theories on this list. I guess I just really wanted to talk about him. If you like hearing about FNAF Freddy's theories and missed the last video, then you will definitely like part 2 where I cover more FNAF theories that aged well. Or even this other video where I talk about theories that didn't age well. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and as always, I hope you're a bit less bored.